parenting, manliness, marriage, fitness, and finance. Nothing's off limits. Morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Surf and Turf Show. With me, as always, is Mr. Adam. How you doing this morning, Adam?
Living the dream, single parenting, got the kids all off in their various execution modalities and doing well.
Dude, my favorite part of your morning story was when you said you had to like sanitize the playground. Is that what you meant?
No, so it just has like the morning dew. So I just go and like wipe it down so they can go out there and play.
No, that makes sense. Playing without just slopping themselves up entirely. They don't go come back in and then it's on the carpet. You're like, what? How?
Yeah.
It's funny. And actually it's interesting because we're talking about one more downside to kids, right? Messing up your house. But my wife this week was like, hey, you guys make parenting sound really not fun. I mean, I know it's funny to talk about all the bad sides of parenting, but you make it really sound like parenting is unenjoyable. Is that true? Do we make parenting sound unenjoyable?
I mean, maybe that's our like blind spot because we're just like, we're just going to talk about it. And I think it's important to acknowledge to me, I'm sure you feel the same way. This is the most important thing I can do as a human. So I feel a lot of contentment and gratitude that I get to be a parent and I get to have this impact on these other humans and just help them grow up and be good humans. So yeah, it may seem like we are Debbie Downers, negative Nancys, but we are just trying to speak honestly about the downsides. We're not talking about all the upsides, which there are significant ones.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think it's easy to talk across the positive parts of something. But I mean, to your point, it is the most important thing I've done in my life is produce new humans. And I take it pretty seriously. And so I think of it in a way that I think of other serious things, which is one, we're going to make some jokes about it because we can never be too serious about everything. But at the same time, I mean, a lot of times you kind of dwell on the risks associated with something or kind of the downsides of it or the things that can go wrong. That's just kind of how I handle more serious problems. I mean, it's all well and good to dwell on the pie in the sky portions of it, but it's the parts that you can mess up that are, to me, the really interesting parts, because those are the parts you really have. It's not interesting to talk about all the stuff that's going well. But yeah, to our point, maybe we do make it sound not fun. But then again, let me circle back and say, honestly, a large portion of parenting isn't that fun. Not in the way that the word fun means. Like it's rewarding, it's gratifying, it's very satisfying in like a professional and personal sense. But I mean, a lot of it's pretty like drudgy, not enjoyable work. I mean, there's only so many, you can't wipe an ass and make it fun. Like you could sing a song like Mary Poppins while you do it, but in the end, you are cleaning, crap out of somebody's crack. And that's just, it's not a joyless task.
The flip side, I've told all my kids, you're going to be doing this to me in a few short decades. So, they're always
wrongs do make a right?
They're very confused by that. But yes. So, and I guess
very few decades.
There was a book a few years ago called All Joy and No Fun about modern parenting. And I think what we have done societally is because we have this ethic of individuality and because however you want to construe it, late stage capitalism, whatever, is like splintered, fractured nuclear families and everybody's living all around the country trying to find jobs. And so we've put max pressure on the two parents, where it used to be you had an extended kin network, you had the neighborhood, everybody is helping out, pitching in to raise these kids. And we've put max pressure on parents, which is why we may come across as a little bit negative about it. And that is the danger, is that people look at that and they make the calculation like, I don't want to do that, bro. Like I want to travel, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And that's totally fine. Like if you want to do that, like much respect. But having children is like the most sacred, amazing thing that I can ever do as a human. So for me, I will do all the drudgery and it's miserable in the moment, but you get something on the backside, and that is kind of the joy and contentment in actually like in being a parent, and you're learning from them a lot of times as much as they're learning from you, and then just helping to cultivate them as they become young humans.
No, I agree. I agree with all sides of that. And we've discussed it before. We've discussed how parenting today is, I think, more arduous in a way than it has been in other eras. Not uniquely so. I'm sure there's plenty of other eras where parenting was equally challenging, but it is a particularly like parental draining period for parenting. And to an extent, I think a lot of what we say is speaking to that, because that's our lived experience, right? So if you took what we're saying and moved it to another era, an era where parenting was a lot more kind of oh, whatever, just let the kids do whatever, I don't care about them, the governess will manage them, um, then what we would be, yeah, said the au pair, yeah, for sure. Then what we would be saying would probably be more in line with the times, but also I think would be less useful. But to me, in those times, you really got to be saying the opposite. Hey, this is why being a parent, engaging with your kids is important. This is why all of those things are so critical to us. Honestly, in our parenting generation, I think all of that is a given. Yeah, it's basically a given that you're going to be just hyper into your kids' everything's and doing things. You're going to be doing the travel sports. You're going to be with them all the time as much as you can. And they're really the center of your life is about the kids. And so we don't talk about it as much, but honestly, that's like the heartbeat of our life right now. Everything we do is kid centered. And so I don't want to sound overly negative about parenting, but I do think it is useful to provide people in that situation with the context that, hey, other people in that situation with you are also kind of struggling with some of the eaches of this. And it does feel a little overwhelming. And some of this that is kind of like, haha, it's funny, but it also sucks. Like, that's part of the experience. And it's not weird that you're having those feelings or that experience. Cause I feel sometimes like people need to hear that. Like, it's not all joy and
Yeah.
rainbows, man. It's not just you that's sucking at 2 a.m.
Yes. And you're not gonna get it right at all. You're gonna totally, and I forget when that moment, I had that moment when I was a kid somewhere, probably in my teens, where you realize like your parents are just like blundering through parenting. Like there's no like super, cheat code. My wife has probably read like, I don't know, 30 books on parenting. I've read, multiple books. I don't think our parents were doing that stuff. I think they maybe read like what to expect when you're expecting. And that may have been like the only thing they read about parenting. And then they're just like, yeah, we'll just figure it out. Like we'll just kind of do it. And so I think just giving yourself the grace that you're not going to be perfect, and that's completely fine. Really, you got to give them a stable environment and, give them regular meals, and then just let them, let them grow.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think what we are talking about is you watch the pendulum of parenting swing, just like so many other pendulums in society swing. We're just providing basically the force that gets the pendulum to eventually start kind of moving back. And will it eventually move back so far into an undesirable location where all of a sudden we're back in Dickinsonian, Britain, where the kids are like, nobody cares about kids. They're just for making shoes. We'll get there. And it's unfortunate that maybe society always works in those kind of big sweeping directional changes. It's unfortunate, but that's maybe everything. And so that being said, I still think it's a message that's got to be heard. People have to hear that, yeah, parenting is challenging. Also, your role in parenting, it does suck, but it's not bad to admit that parts of your job suck. It's fine. In fact, if you don't admit it, it kind of creates this false sense of expectation. You get that like Facebook mentality of everybody's life is perfect but mine. Why does my life suck? Why is my parenting experience so full of like pain when everybody else's is just beautiful and glowing? Like, no, there's a lot of good stuff. Those Facebook moments with your kids are real, and it's super gratifying. It's even fun, but it also sucks. And so I think you got to talk
Right.
about all that honestly.
Yes. And I definitely, I would, it's like 10 out of 10 recommend. I would definitely, like, if I didn't have kids, like I would definitely have kids again. It's definitely, there are trade-offs like everything in life. So you're not going to be able to do, you may not be able to do everything individually that you wanted to do. But like, I mean, look at like Nancy Pelosi, like she raised like 5 kids, and then she's like, boom, like then I'll be like Speaker of the House. You know what I mean? Like there's time in our lives to, if we're a little patient, to kind of accomplish everything we want to accomplish individually and, grow a family.
That's 100% true. And man, I would love to have the energy that lady has when I'm that age. Like man, I'm struggling to remember stuff and get it moving some days now. I'm like, she's like 3 times my age and she's still doing all those things. It's amazing. Like, I don't know where she
Yeah.
finds it. Like
It's,
I,
yeah,
I can't even imagine. Hmm.
I'm definitely hoping, I'll be as sharp and active when I'm older. I think that just comes back. We'll probably get to like, fitness at some point, nutrition, and, trying to, you know, set ourselves up for long lives.
Yeah, that's right. You want to set the angle of the slope toward death to be as shallow as possible so that you don't hit one of those like terminal nosedives. Like, oh, I can't do anything anymore. Like, you don't want to get there too early. You want that slope to be
Right.
nice and shallow. But it is a slope.
It is.
But that being said, I guess I just want to conclude that by saying, yeah, actually, man, a lot of parenting is fun. I have a good time with my kids. I actually enjoy a lot of it. And it's super rewarding, man. It's very gratifying. It's very rewarding. No question about any of that. But man, there's trades. You definitely make trades and you definitely give up freedom, I think, to a great degree, to
Mhm.
trade freedom for what you're getting out of it. And it would be foolish to pretend like you're not.
Yes. And I think, and there are moments, I wish there were more moments where I could be more mindful of like, I just kind of drop into the moment and I'm like, this will never come again. You know, this moment where like they're this age, you're seeing the world through their eyes and it's just an amazing thing. And if you can just dwell in, you know, moments like that, like I was playing soccer with my son last night and it was just like, you know, it's sunset, it's beautiful. And I'm like, man, I could just live in this moment because it's like, it's nice, you know, because before I know, like, you know, Memento Mori, Tempest Fugit, you know, Remember You Must Die, and Time Flies, and it's just going to go. So, you know, even in those tough moments, if you can train yourself to respond to them, you know, with grace and with patience and with humor, you're going to have a lot better time.
No, you're absolutely right. You kind of just sounded like an Aerosmith song just then. Like if I could, stay awake just to hear you breathing, like
Oh,
right in that moment. Oh man, it
from
just took me back to Armageddon,
yes, 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 yes.
like young Dan sitting in the movie theater there.
Have you
Um,
heard Ben Affleck like doing the like director's cut of that?
no,
There's
is
like
it
this
great?
clip where he is like he's like just savaging the plot. Like he's like, yep, like I talked to Michael Bay and I'm like, why aren't we training astronauts to be miners instead of miners to be astronauts? And he said, shut up, Ben. So that was the end of that conversation. And then he just starts like he just, you know, at some, you know, he comes off a little arrogant, but like it's funny to listen to him like make fun of like the, you know, the premise of that movie, like sending the miners into space.
It's good. It's good that people can have a good sense of humor about that, right? Because you see Steve Buscemi, as an astronaut and
Yes.
also a guy with massive gambling debts. I mean, on the one hand, coming from the communities we do, it's
Yeah.
weirdly it was kind of believable. Like when I saw that
Yes.
pipeline, is like that's about how like guys would have handled that. Like would have gotten drunk every night and totally made light of it and probably screwed it up at the end. But it was still, yeah, obviously ridiculous. But
Yes. Absolutely.
yeah, it's a '90s movie, right? '90s movies
It
are
is.
ridiculous.
It's beautiful. Michael Bay, lots of explosions.
Dude, it's amazing. At least it wasn't Pearl Harbor. God, that's the worst. The worst movie. Just
Yeah.
how
That.
did you
Yeah.
make that story so bad? Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know. But it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Everybody knows that. That's a cliche. But speaking of movies, let's talk about an awesome movie because you referred me to a clip not too long ago where it took a riff off the original Karate Kid and said Daniel LaRusso is the bad guy. And I watched it and I was delighted. Man, one that is
Mm.
just super hilarious. I love that the guy could go through there, the narrator, and try
Yes.
to actually put that spin on it. That in fact Johnny is the good guy. He's just this put upon great dude who gets used and abused by what does he call him, the sociopath Daniel
Oh,
LaRusso
yes.
and his
Yes.
and his demon sorcerer friend Miyagi. And man, priceless. Price is great.
Yes.
Good times.
So yeah, so that's a great example of look, you know, everyone's the hero of their own story, and when we reframe things from other perspectives, like so you have like Wicked, you know, from the Wicked Witch's perspective,
Yep.
you've got Interview with the Vampire, and then the second book is called Lestat. So the second book is like from the other, you know, the villain from the first book's perspective. But yes, great example of flipping the perspective. And if I could just evangelize for a moment about the show Cobra Kai, because if you start
I haven't
watching
seen it.
that, so you're in for a treat, my friend. So they basically Cobra Kai picks up, we're at present day, and as you can imagine, the trajectory of Johnny's life. He's been kind of bumming around from, odd jobs here and there. He wakes up like hungover on his floor of his like shitty apartment. And then Daniel is a very successful car dealer in the California Valley. And so the first season goes back and forth between Johnny and Daniel's perspectives. And what's great about it is both of them are kind of the heroes. They're both like co-protagonists, and then they are building to a confrontation. And then what I love about the show most of all for our demographic and for our kids is there's an old person storyline, right? Like there's like the 50 something, 60 something storyline, which is how the hell do I teach my kids what I've learned about life? Like how do I transmit that knowledge? And then for the teenagers, there's a whole separate storyline, which is them dealing with cyberbullying and like falling in love and like karate, obviously. And
It's
so
karate because karate.
yes, but like so what's great is like there's something for our kids and there's something for us as the parents. And it's just a wonderful, I would almost say like Shakespearean in terms of like the plot lines. Like it's anyway. So all I would say is I love it's one of my favorite shows and it's worth checking out.
I've got to check it out. I mean, you touched on so many interesting things just then, like so many of the things you're talking about where, okay, this one moment, because when you're a kid, it seems like these two protagonists represent these like primal truths about the universe, right? Where good guy, bad guy. But you look at it now, you're like, those kids are 16. I mean, everybody is kind of a dick when they're 16. And, like, hey, they probably would have grown out of it. But now you have this adversity situation and it was humiliating. And apparently Daniel took that and ran with it his whole life. And Johnny didn't. He didn't, take a failure and kind of learn from it and kind of adapt. But then you get into the next generation of that, like, well, how do you impart that in your kids? Because what do they say? Soft men make soft times.
Hard times.
Is that right?
No,
soft men make hard times. Yes. Yeah. Let's see. How do we? Hard men make soft times, right? Hard men make soft times. And so you end up in this case where Daniel LaRusso in this case really put up with a lot to kind of get where he was. And then he's got his kids there who are now just ridiculously affluent, probably by the standard with which he grew up. And you're just, how do I impart that hard work and catching flies with chopsticks and waxing cars for 7 hours in kids that just don't have that experience? But I want to transmit those lessons. And you take it to the flip side of it. And Johnny's kids are going to get those lessons because, hey, man, you got to get out there and hustle to make your way because you're not getting anything for free. And so it's funny to watch that back and forth. And I think about that so often from a parenting point of view.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And yeah, I definitely like you think about that cycle. So like North Korea, you got, Kim Il-sung or whatever, like founds the place and then like his son takes it and then the grandson seems like he's doing all right. He's obviously ruthlessly murdering people, but like you would think that by the third generation, he would not have like the chops to keep it together. Maybe North Korea is a bad idea, bad example, but the point being like that generational transfer, right? So normally by like the third generation, the kid doesn't have like the political skills, the scrappiness to maneuver right in a contested environment. But so I definitely think about it a lot. My wife and I think about that a lot. Like, how do we give the kids, we want to give them a better life than we had, but we also want them to have kind of the drive to do whatever they want to do, not to go like, grind in some, hellhole cubicle job, but like just to find like what they want and apply themselves to it, effectively.
Right. You want them to be able to find purpose. And a lot of what drove us to find purpose is the experience we had growing up, which involved, I'm not going to say a great deal of austerity. I didn't grow up in like urban Haiti or something, but I mean, when I look at my kids, it was relative austerity.
Yes.
And so I felt like there was you got to sink or swim, or you got to swim or you're going to sink, kid. And I feel that mentality is easily lost. It's quickly lost. And then you have to kind of refine it. And it's tough. It's tough to figure out how to impart that. But at the same time, as a parent, you want to give the kids the advantages you can provide them. But what if those advantages simultaneously deny them the other advantages that you're kind of looking past because you got them functionally kind of for free? And now you can't even impart them on them because the environment doesn't allow it. It's just a strange, almost chasing your tail sort of scenario.
Yes. And so they have to have, this goes back to like adversity, and they have to have something that they're testing themselves against. It may be sports. It may not be sports, right? It may be like math Olympiad. It may be, scouts. But the point is like, they need to encounter friction, and then test themselves against it. Maybe they fall short, maybe they succeed, but they're developing that, interaction with the environment that is, okay, this didn't go the way I wanted. Let me like do an after action. Okay, what do I need to do next time to improve this? Apply themselves. And so it doesn't really matter what that thing is, as long as there is something like that in their life.
I agree completely. And we should put a pin in that because we'll circle back to it in a second, because actually It's the purpose of today's episode, right? The thing we were going to talk about today, we're kind of continuing our series on how do we make risk mitigation approachable and how do we make it something that people can, deal with in their day-to-day lives. And then how do you kind of take those lessons and learn from them? And we've done the physical and the mental. We've applied it all to parenting. We talked about the kind of lines of effort. We like our kids to be, physically healthy and capable, mentally, solid, flexible, but not dogmatic. You want spiritually, I think you want your kids to be purposeful and to have some sort of ethical and moral foundation. And then, of course, financial and social, which we'll get to later. But now we're on the spiritual one, which is an interesting one to me because honestly, growing up, I didn't put a lot of thought into spirituality. But as I've gotten older, the need for purpose and the need for kind of this baseline has kind of grown. I've gotten less relativistic as I've gotten older and more, no, we need to have some kind of foundation. But that's really what we want to talk about today. And the Daniel LaRusso one, it made me laugh because one of our assigned readings for this was C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity. And if you've never read the first part of the first book of Mere Christianity, even if you're not a Christian, it's just he wrote it for the New York Times. He wrote it for the Times, the London Times. He wrote it as a series of articles to normal people, like regular folks. And he wrote it to describe, basically, long form, he wrote it to eventually justify Christianity and his position as a Christian. But the first parts of it, to me, even if you're not a Christian, are super amazing to read because what he really does is he just breaks down why relativism, when you're talking about ethics, morality, why relativism doesn't make a lot of sense. And to me, it really resonated. And it stuck with me when I was watching the Karate Kid show because one of the things C.S. Lewis really points out is, hey, actually, you can say that morality and ethics are relative and that it's different for you and that it's a societal construct and that what you think is moral is not what I think is moral. But when we see something that we think is bad, or when we do something that is bad, we all kind of know it. And that Karate Kid show screamed it at me because you could watch it and you can hear the narrator's words and you can hear him trying to spin it that Daniel LaRusso is the bad guy. But in your head, you can laugh, but it's not the case. You're like, nah, man, come on. Like you can't sell me on this. Not real. What do you think?
I don't know. When he came down in the beach and started beefing with Johnny, I could see and then when he messed with him in the bathroom at the dance, I was like, man, Daniel's kind of asking for this. Like, that's not like, if I was getting bullied, I don't know if I would start trolling the bully. I don't know. Maybe I would, maybe that's like my way to get back at the bully. I don't know. But,
I don't disagree with that, but getting chased down by people in motorcycles in skeleton costumes and getting the shit kicked out of you is it's hard to say that that's like a solid proportional response to getting sprayed with water in a shower.
So I agree with you on that. I'm saying Daniel's not blameless in this scenario.
100%, absolutely. But it is funny, right? And that kind of gets us to where we are today, though. We're trying to figure out. You can always discuss the H's of ethics and morality, and it is going to be different, I think, for everyone. The one, what the foundation they hold for themselves is, and two, what they look to impart on their kids. But I actually do think that some kind of, ethical or moral foundation is an important thing to impart while parenting. Like, I'm going to go and stand on that one and toss it out. Like, what do you think? Is that true or false?
Yeah. So, and I'm going to disclose my priors, and then I'm going to set the table a little bit for the environment. So I grew up very secular humanist, I would say. So my family had kind of fallen away from Catholicism and like evangelical Christianity for various reasons. And so I grew up like, I thought organized religion was like, you make fun of it. Like it was like Tammy Faye Baker and Oral Roberts, if you remember that stuff from the 80s and 90s, like televangelists. That was kind of my like grounding in religion. I'm like, oh, this is stupid, right?
Which was the standard of the times, just to contextualize it. That was totally normal in the 80s. That's everybody's position.
And so, and then if you look at like broad societal trends, right? Like we have the Enlightenment, which totally challenges religion's role in the human life and starts chipping away at that, right? Like Copernicus, like, hey, we're not the center of the universe, yada, yada, yada. And then we get into, postmodernism, which is definitely the case of, hey, all these values are relative and, nihilism, like there's definitely like, there's no grand narratives, although that in itself is a grand narrative. But we'll just put a pin in that and put that to the side for a second, right? So that's kind of the milieu that we are talking about in this present moment. So to get to your question, like, yes, there are values that we want to impart onto our children, and then what follows from that is like, how are those? How are we picking those values? Like, how are we deciding which ones are good?
Sure. That is the challenge, right? That is the challenge, is figuring out like, well, what's the right things to impart in them? What found, and one, can you impart them? Which is another topic. I actually have had kind of weird experience. I almost go back to our last episode where we talk about, well, I'm going to throw seeds out there. I'm going to see what sticks and what grows. But I grew up like you. I was, let's say, our family was casually Catholic. We were Catholic. We went to some church. I felt like we were about as Catholic as anybody in the 80s that I knew. And so, which is not very, right? I don't feel like it really penetrated. We just did church. We did the motions. We did the things. And that was kind of as Catholic as we were. And so I grew up with kind of thinking religion is fairly ridiculous. Like, am I kind of like you? It was a thing to be kind of parodied, like, oh, it's funny, it's a silly thing, but it's not really that important. I've since changed my tone on that, and I'm still not rock solid, but I that was where it started.
And it's interesting that you bring that up, like because I think one of the problems today is that us contemporary people, like, we don't have enough rituals. And so, the ritual has to be the enactment, and then it has to be like felt, mind, body, and spirit. Right. So,
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about kind of rituals that are like divorced from the ultimate, like, meaning, like you're just kind of performing them. And I think, there's a little bit of value to that, but yeah, I think we want to get to the place where we're actually like embodying, the ritual kind of on all cylinders.
No, and I think that what you're talking about there is kind of where I was going with why it's important to impart values in your kid, is because I felt growing up that I was sort of an empty glass from the spiritual, purposeful side of things. Maybe like a quarter full. There's a little bit in there of trappings, but not a lot of like deep meaning. But what I looked across my peers and I looked across the people who I grew up with, what I found is that empty glasses got filled. Like, as you grow, they're going to get filled for sure. So you're going to find a reason. You're going to find a thing that you latch onto. And as a parent, I find that to be a super dangerous variable, because it can get filled with all kinds of things. And I watched people try to fill it with, hedonism, or honestly, like super fundamentalist, like aggressive religion. That's kind of, to me, like gets into the super judgmental side and is no longer constructive. With nothing, straight nihilistic purposelessness, and drifting along doing nothing but drugs until they died. And I I think that to counter that, we do at least have to at least offer things that can fill that glass a little bit, to try and launch them out of the house with something a little more substantive than, it's all kind of ridiculous, just figure it out. I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming at it from as a parent. Is that, are you approaching it similarly?
Yes, yes. And so there's a really great David Foster Wallace speech where he talks at a college graduation, like commencement. It's called "This Is Water." So if you've never seen it, just check it out. It's like 12 minutes or something. You can find it on YouTube. But he talks about in that speech that we're all going to worship something. So if you don't align yourself towards like the thing that you're going to worship, something will, you're going to start worshiping money, or you're going to start worshiping, glamour, fame, superficial things that are not going to lead you down a good path. So he's like, you got to set that, the thing that you're going to kind of align your compass to has to be good, because if you don't have that, it'll just, like you said, the glass will get filled by whatever comes along.
It, yeah, exactly. It seems that way. That's been again, we talk about anecdotes and data, but anecdotally, that is what I've seen around me. I've seen people kind of filling their glasses with things. Like, for example, a common thing that I see people fill their glasses with right now is frankly kind of the environmental movement. Like, I don't scoff at the environmental movement. I don't think that it's bad to be a good steward of the planet by all means, but you do see people where it starts to take almost these religious overtones of like self-sacrifice. We are bad. We are evil. We need to, it starts to sound not a lot unlike the kind of negative sides I heard about Catholicism when I was a kid. And you hear this stuff and you're like, well, I sometimes think people are imparting too much meaning. What is fundamentally to me a very practical thing of like, well, I live here. I should clean this place up and keep it nice because I would like my kids to also live here. But it starts to get deeper than that. And that sounds like that kind of glass to me. Like, is that what's going on?
Yes, and I think, and I what I see the political polarization of the last whatever 15 years, 20 years. What I
Hmm.
see is we've gone away from, and this is me, like I'm not in a religion. I'm just looking at the situation, like what is
Just
happening.
talking about it, man. We're
Like I'm
just
like,
talking
what
about
is happening? And
it. Hmm.
we don't have a we're not foregrounding something like something sacred at the center. So then what happens is we are going to fill that with politics. So you've got, the MAGA movement on the right that is like, we are all in for this guy. He's our guy. We are worshiping this dude. And this movement assumes it takes that spiritual position. And then on the left, you have, whatever you want to call it, wokeness, critical race theory, like all that stuff then now becomes that is the sacred, right? We've
The
got original
ideology. The
sin. Yeah.
ideology becomes the sacred.
Yes. And you've got original sin. You've got the problem with these movements is they don't have grace and forgiveness, right? So we have all the downside of religion, but we don't have like the upside in them. And that's kind of the where religion has been like pressure tested by centuries and eons,
Hmm.
right? So they're like, okay, let's do this practice. Let's fast for a month. Let's do this. Let's do this. Like all those practices are built in there to benefit the human flourishing, right? But when we don't have that, it just becomes very ad hoc, and it can be hijacked by various like negative attractors of the system.
Yeah, it feels to me flimsier and more fragile in the sense that, well, that foundation's not that solid, to your point. So you could shake that up. You can bring in somebody that changes it. You can create a strong sense of like kind of collapse if it turns out that disillusionment happens because you're really attached to this thing and you find out that it's not maybe what you thought, or as you get older you start to get a little more perspective, and then that crash can lead to some really dramatic swings. And I gotta think that part of the reason things feel so volatile right now is because people's foundations are based on fairly transient uh, kind of foundations. And so as they shift around radically, there's just, and like you said, there's no forgiveness built in. So it ends up, when you feel bad, you're going to naturally reach out to blame someone else. I think that's kind of on inherent. And so you get very teamy about it and you get very unstable, and it feels like everything is just going everywhere. And I want to avoid that for my kids. And so to what we did, right? Anyway, so yes, we could talk forever about that. We could talk forever about why society kind of is where it is. But these are the observations that I think you and I are making as we are producing young humans and saying, how do I sidestep that issue? How do I keep my kids from needing this in their lives? And so they latch on to what they latch onto and just like run with it and maybe become a person that I would have a hard time being around because I just find it super like judgmental and unpleasant. And like, and that's the opposite of what I impart. Like one of my, like the golden rule of parenting for me is don't be a dick. Like if you can just go through life and not be a dick, you're probably, going to be all right. I mean, there's a lot of other things, but that is so, it's the core of how I feel people need to interact in society. And I want to avoid people growing up and not being able to do that.
Yeah, and that's the via negativa, right? Like the negative path. You're like, well, if I can avoid all these pitfalls, if I can avoid like porn,
Mm-hmm.
drugs, like
80s video game, man. 80s video game.
if I can avoid all of
Crocodiles,
these, yeah,
water,
like
scorpion.
then what is left will probably be like pretty good, right? So
Yes.
how do we do that? Like how do we do that? And you know, I have a lot of respect for faith traditions, and I think if you can adopt one, whatever it is, I think it's good for humans. We're in an age where some people are moving away from traditional faith, and some people are moving towards it. Right, we're seeing a lot of Gen Z move towards like Orthodox Christianity, and other. They're looking for that like ritual. They're looking for that
100%.
total package of like to orient and scaffold their life. And the danger is like we're in the surf zone and we're just floating in and out with the tide and the surf, and we're getting
Mm-hmm.
drug every which direction. So how do you move through life like that? Like you're in the surf zone.
Yes,
So you
exactly. That's a
need
great metaphor.
scaffolding and a compass. And that's where how do you do that? And can you do it without a faith tradition? Yeah, probably. But like if you can, like these things are already like pre-built. They're like, here you go, bro, like plug and play.
Yeah, so that's it. And we're kind of talking the long way around this, but it is kind of hard to wicker down exactly. But what you just said That's exactly correct. I love that metaphor because one of the things is I feel that I grew up in the surf zone. I feel that you grew up in the surf zone, and we recognize that it's not a place we wish to be from a kind of moral, ethical, purposeful place. We don't want to stay here because it kind of sucks. And I'm watching a lot of people get beat down by it. I want to move out to deeper water where things are stable or back to land because I'm a land dude. You're the surfy dude. I actually am good with just the dirt. Dirt's great. Dirt doesn't move that much. I love dirt. But I want my kids to have that. And so a lot of my young adult and into now middle age, tragically, life has been spent trying to figure out how to get out there. And for us, one of the things we tried to do, and this goes back to some of the education thing, is we wanted to throw books in there, and throw ideas in there, and throw faith system in there, frankly. And so, on the book side, we were like Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors and The Origin of Virtue. We're both like, well, we want to make sure that we have some secular underpinning on this. We're both super, I think, rational. We aim to be rational. And so we wanted to make sure that you could also underpin this with some kind of, I guess, materialistic solution, something that a rational person, so we could talk about the split between the rational and the spiritual, but something that you with a math science brain could say, well, this actually makes sense. It's a good way to be. But we threw Catholicism in, right? That was our choice. Like you're going to pick your one. We said we like Catholicism. We think Catholicism is the best when we kind of cast around to find what a solid system was. And the weird thing to me, and you just talked about it with the Gen Z kids, is these are seeds. I'm throwing them out there. I'm a surf zone guy. I'm a little wishy-washy on a lot of this as we get started in it, right? But I throw the seeds out and I'm like, whoa, that old solid system, in this case, Catholicism, it stuck. And my kids gravitated toward it. Like they 100% gripped it, like seriously and deeply in a way that I never did growing up. And I was just blown away by that. Never would have picked that in 100 years, but it did achieve the intent that I was looking for.
And so let me go back to, I think you made a point earlier about, you know, I'm not going to be able to like force my kids to do anything, right? Like they're going to adopt it or they're not. So you're throwing the seeds out. So, and I think you're absolutely right. They're going to learn a lot more from my example than what I preach, right? So they're going to see like, what is this guy doing? Like, what's he doing? He's doing this. He's doing this. They're going to learn from how I conduct my life. So that's an important thing. Just like when we're leading troops in the military. And then I think the other factor that may be different from when we grew up was right now we are in this era where all of these institutions have just been crumbling and decaying away. So some of the handholds that you and I had when we were kids were a little bit stronger. And now we're in this, we're more disconnected from our communities. We're more insular. So a lot of the, and that's why I love Freya India on Substack. Like she's like a Gen Z British woman that she talks about a lot of this stuff from a Gen Z perspective. And I love her writing because she's really calling attention to a lot of, the hand that Gen Z has been dealt. So we can like, oh, let's shit on boomers. You're the worst. Millennials, you're the worst. Like, obviously, like Gen Z never gets like talked about. It's always like boomers, millennials, Gen Z, and they're like, the hell, man, you skipped a generation. But that's classic. That's like on brand for Gen X, right? But so like the hand they've been dealt is like, yeah, like, oh, can you afford a house? Like, no. Can you do this? No. Can you like, so they're in a totally different context. So it's important to like realize they don't have maybe the handholds that we had growing up.
No, that's true. And the perspective on that, I have found it actually quite difficult to get my hands around the Gen Z perspective on a lot of these issues because on the one hand, as a Gen X kid, I think I'm pretty typical of my generation. I have a hard time taking anything very seriously. Anything. In fact, it's quite the contrary. Where almost always everything is to be scoffed at, ridiculed, and made light of. That is it. They do not. My kids, I can't speak for a whole generation. My kids, and I find the writings of Gen Z folks to be somewhat on par with this, do not feel that way. They're actually quite sacred things. There are things that they don't like the humor that's super, on this old like reprobate that's saying like scandalous things all the time. Not appreciative of that at all. Totally different. And it's hard for me to wrap my head around that. Like that has taken a lot of brain power to try and put myself in the place where I'm not like, wait, are you just kidding? Are you just like being a little tongue in cheek here? Are you just straight, you're just deadpan humoring me to get me to bite? Cause then you're going to turn around and laugh. You're like, no, actually they're not at all. And that's strange. That is super strange to me.
And so what you bring up there is like, I view we've got a transition between like, you know, modernism, postmodernism, and then metamodernism on the backside. So modernism is very much like you can call it like pre-tragic. You can say like naively optimistic. It's very, you know, there's a grand narrative of progress. We're going to do it. Rah, rah, yay.
British
You
Empire,
know,
right? British Empire.
yeah, like we're doing it. And then you get to postmodern, which is very like nihilistic, cynical, relativistic, ironic. That's like I think the biggest thing. So you
Mm-hmm.
and I grew up in the 80s and 90s where like irony was like the big thing, like cynicism. Like, oh, this is like we're skeptical, we're cynical,
Cynically
whatever.
clever. Cynically clever. Oh,
But
that's
then
just absolutely
yeah,
current
so you
theory. Yeah.
got modernism thesis, postmodernism antithesis, like the opposite, and then synthesis metamodernism. So there now we're at like BoJack Horseman. Now we're talking about you're sincerely ironic or you're like pragmatically naive. You're post-tragic, right? So
More
postmodernism
adverbs.
is
That's the key.
yeah.
More adverbs.
So but so what I'm getting at is like they are now trying to you know, embody like what was good about modernism, the critique that came from postmodernism, and then they're looking for like they want to be earnest again, like they want to be like
Hmm.
fired up about something, but they can also be playful and like wink at you at the same time. So yeah, like I think you're onto something with that. Like you know, they want to be serious.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, as a parent, it pleases me. Like it pleases me just, and like as a straight pragmatic parent, I love it.
Yeah,
Like when my arguments with my teenage daughter are about like, hey, sweetie, we're going to the beach. You don't have to be that modest. You can actually like you can wear the swimsuit. You can get in the water. It's fine. You don't need to worry about this. But in her mind, she's like, I I'm being immodest. Like I am kind of violating the tenets of my faith. I'm doing things that I don't think are correct. And she's got the strength of character to be like, no, I'm just not interested in doing that. I'm going to stick with my guns on this, and I'm totally okay with that. And I mean, when I think about like acts of teenage rebellion, I'm like, well, in the grand scheme of things, I'm totally good at that. Right? I'm like, well, this is pragmatically super good. But on the backside of my brain, I can both not understand it, but also kind of respect it at the same time because it's
yeah.
just so unlike anything I've ever seen.
Well, and it's interesting because then it brings up like if the whole society is very, you know, they're not religious for the most part, then you know choosing that life is actually like the countercultural move. It's like it's a
Right.
weird, you know, it's like
It's the
against the
beatnik
dominant.
move of the 20s, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
well, it's
It's
so
weird.
weird.
Yeah.
It's super weird. And again, not upset, super happy. Like the kids enjoy volunteer work. They feel that it's important to give back to the community. And I see this. I'm like, one, who are you?
Yeah.
Wow. What happened? How did I accidentally produce that? But at the other hand, I'm like, man, that's amazing. Like, it's just
Yeah.
amazing to see the plants that can grow from the seeds you cast out there. You're like, I hope some of this sticks. And you're like, whoa, I stuck way better than I ever thought it would. He grew into something kind of amazing and a little alien, but totally amazing.
Yeah. And I definitely like I believe like it sucks to think like, you know, you're not the hero of your own story with like, you know, as a Gen Xer, but like I really believe like this generation like that's coming up has to they have to like rebuild the world. Like they have to like all these institutions, like we're in this deep cycle where all these institutions are not serving us anymore. The way that the scaffolding that we have on society and culture is not really working with all the changes going on. So they're going to have to take what's old. Okay, we want to keep X, Y, and Z because those are good, and then let's cultivate a better thing on the backside of all of this dumpster fire.
100%. 100%. I think you're spot on. They're the folks that are going to have to pick this thing up and figure out how to make it function again. And it's funny, but just to put a total stamp on this and say, yeah, 100%, we are not the heroes of our story. You
Right.
and me and the rest of probably most of Gen X ain't the heroes.
like,
I don't think anybody's under the conception that we are. Like,
Well, yeah. I mean,
we're the heroes of the story.
I view us as like we're like caretakers and we're in a line of like we need to transmit what we can to the next generation and they will then take oh, okay, that worked, that didn't work. I didn't like the way that they did that. So they're going to like do it. So I definitely like I'm excited for them. Like it's a cool opportunity they have if they, you know, and I have full confidence like if you look at the Gen Z in like Ukraine and Israel, like they are just crushing it. Like they are rising to the challenge of their generation. So there's no reason to think like American Gen Z is going to be any different. Like they're going to freaking just come up and just crush.
No, on the contrary, I see lots of positive indicators there. And this is coming from a guy who I feel like I'm never going to get out of the surf zone. I'm never going to get out of the surf zone. I'm just going to be in the surf zone, and that's where I'm going to live, and it's always going to be there. And we'll make fun of people who aren't in the surf zone because surf zone's a hard place, and people should be in hard places, right? We'll do that. But I can appreciate the value of being able to hopefully launch people from the surf zone to somewhere solid, somewhere where they can really start doing things. The more that they can feel the sensations and have the sense of purpose that I really never had. And so I think to my death, I'm going to be a pragmatic sort of, I'm never going to get past that. But I think if I could provide my kids with the opportunity to do so, I will feel that I succeeded as a parent. Like that's my thought on kind of the spiritual line of effort here.
Yeah. So, and then it brings up like, what are we actually talking about? Like what values? And so, I wrote an essay last week, about a real quick book I read, by a guy named Brendan Graham Dempsey. The book is called A Universal Learning Process, I think.
Good article, man. You're a solid writer. Like you take that stuff and digest it and turn it into excellent kind of summaries with good conclusions. You make it all approachable. Your Substack's great.
Yes, thank you. That is high praise. I appreciate it. But yeah, sorry, I'm not used to.
We're not good at receiving praise. I get it.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm definitely
gotta
not.
scoff at it.
I'm
Scoff
just like, yeah,
You're
whatever.
ugly,
I'm just.
You suck. You suck.
Just
there you go. Is it better now?
Yes, thank you.
Keep going.
I feel better now. But so what he does is this amazing thing where he takes all the components of existence, right? From a quark all the way up to a human society. And he kind of makes this case for a thread that runs through them all. And that is like kind of persisting in time. So what he's doing is he's like taking the notion of the sacred and he's making a scientific argument. We're using the work of guys like Bobby Azarian and Greg Henriquez, a psychologist and like a neurobiologist, I think. And basically like, looking at matter and looking at what are the attractors, what are the things that those entities are moving towards, right? So staying alive through time and fighting entropy, basically are the initial values of things, as atoms are coming together into molecules, are coming into like multicellular, prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and then they're becoming like animals, and then they're moving into humans and then human societies, right? So, the
define
thread
meaning, right? To define meaning. That's really his goal.
Yes. So basically, the long story short is, the sacred for him is like kind of what is persisting, what is going to cause us to persist in time. So when we look at humans and we look at human societies, like we've got to ask ourselves, like, what are the things that will help us persist in time? And then we can kind of foreground those values. And I see religion as like a way to, religion is just humans, like over time, they're like, what are these things that are going to help us? Let's like salt them into a practice and let's have humans do those things.
I think that's a pragmatic view of religion. I don't think, well, it kind of sidesteps the issue of what's objectively true and what isn't, right? But reading through the article, one, I liked it. It's a good read. It's interesting, but it makes me giggle just a little. And the reason it makes me giggle is because I feel that, I mean, obviously, we talk about Carl Sagan, Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors. We talk about The Origin of Virtue. We talk about these materialist foundational documents that are looking to find purpose and meaning. And the reason it makes me giggle is I feel that invariably you always hit the same place. We're like, look, man, science and reason and observation are never going to bridge the gap into meaning, purpose, and kind of the why behind things. And so I kind of laugh when people spend tremendous amounts of work. Like, okay, so let's say that, we're talking about defying entropy. I think that's one of the words that he uses in this. We're like, matter is clinging together to defy entropy. That language creates the impression that there's like purpose and meaning behind this, but he's just like way blindsiding the idea. Well, if it's designed this way, and if there's somebody that kind of put it together and made it run that way, that's why it's purposeful. But if there's not, and there's nothing there, there's no way to defy that this kind of term that implies some kind of will It's not there then. Like if there's nothing behind it, then that word is silly. It's just the nature of the things that they happen to be that way. And trying to find meaning behind it gets a little, to me, a little ridiculous. Like, come on, you're really working hard to try and dig into that, but I don't see it.
So I don't agree. So I would definitely agree. Like defy annihilation. Maybe he could use a different, he could use different
The
terminology there,
struggle, the
right? But
struggle.
like it's it's the age old philosophical question. Like why is there something rather than nothing? Like why is that? And
Mhm.
physicists are looking into it. They're like, okay, multi-dimension, and this is the only dimension where life is. Yada yada yada. You got the Goldilocks zone where water can exist in liquid form. In terms of like the distance from the sun. Um,
Mhm.
but what he's trying to do is,
Goldilocks.
philosophically, you've got, pure materialism where it's like, it's all just physical things. And then you got
Mhm.
idealism where it's like everything is just, in our heads constructed. Um,
It's just, yeah, our interaction with the environment is the environment, and the idealist kind
yes.
of,
And
yes, agreed.
so we've got, we're coming from a paradigm from the Enlightenment of materialism. Like, hey, if I can't describe it and this, that, and the other, it doesn't exist. Right. And that's because science is like this flashlight in the darkness that is beautiful and miraculous, but it's only this like incomplete thing. So science
Mhm.
is a value. It's like one of our most valuable tools, but it is incomplete and we can't do it with just science. Right. I think that's what you're getting at with.
Necessarily incomplete by
Yes.
structural design. It could never reach outside of what you can observe.
Yes. And so, but what I see Dempsey doing and Henriquez and Azarian is they are trying to find a meeting point between science and religion that is like, no, this is actually like a thing that is complexifying, right? So this process naturally plays out and we're moving to greater and greater states of complexity as you move from atoms to molecules to cells to animals to humans to societies. We are naturally complexifying. So there's a way to like bridge this gap, and we can explain it with meaning and learning and values that are threaded through all these different levels.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense to me. And I haven't read the entire book. I only read your article on it. So I'm not going to say whether or not they think there's underpinning or there isn't on kind of the religious perspective. But to me, honestly, one of the reasons that we ended up picking Catholicism is um, that gets solved. It's instantly solved. You don't have to really work very hard to, like Carl Sagan says, if we could only get a religion that you generate a religion that captures the sense of wonder that I feel when I look at the universe, like, well, that's already there, man. I mean, just because nobody took it very seriously when we were kids doesn't mean that that sense of wonder and awe and majesty isn't already there. And when you look at the connective tissue between meaning and why and science, I guess meaning, purpose, and observed facts, like it's all already built in as a package deal. And so even I think that sometimes we work too hard to kind of cleverly pick apart things that are actually kind of intuitively true. And I think that's one of the reasons I love C.S. Lewis is like if he does a good job of just showing in very plain language, like, hey, if you just think about it for 4 seconds, you can kind of tell why things are put together the way they are. And it's kind of intuitive. And that he would argue that that intuition is put in us for a reason because it was by design. And that's why it's there. And so I don't claim to be an expert on any of this. And I don't, claim to say, hey, man, I'm right and everybody else is wrong. I not at all. But when I look at why I picked what I picked for my kids, I like the kind of elegance of that system sitting together so nicely. It's not exclusive of science. It puts science in its place and it puts, the spiritual and kind of why of the world in its place.
Mhm.
And I think it knits them together pretty nicely.
So yeah, I mean, I agree. I think I'm trying to. I'm always searching for a way to speak to as many people as possible about the sacred, right? So you have
Hmm.
people in traditional faith traditions. You have people that are like spiritual but not religious, quote unquote, that are like they're looking for meaning in various modalities, and then you have like the atheist agnostics that are just like, yeah, man, no, it's just freaking it's just electrical currents in the brain, and then when you die, like
True
that's it.
nihilism. True nihilism.
Yeah. So I'm
Like no
always trying to
purpose, just accident.
find ways to speak to those kind of three crowds. And so while I don't disagree with you about like, yeah, like just get in and like pick a practice and start doing it. They're all the goal is the same. The top of the mountain is the same place. Not everybody's there. So I'm trying to like
Hmm.
bring those people along and kind of show the miracle that this all is in different ways of like referring to it, so that everybody like has that awe. And some people are going to find it in nature, and some people are just going to find it like, yep, that makes sense, like there's something here, and they're going to conceive of it in a different way.
No, that's completely true. And honestly, I feel like I've walked that same struggle most of my life in that surf zone, right? Of like, I don't really know how to find a thing that I take very seriously. I don't know how to put these things together. So I don't want to come across as overconfident when I'm saying, hey, we picked this and I think this is a fine answer. We did pick it. I do think
Yeah.
it's a fine answer, but that doesn't mean that my honestly foundation is as solid as it apparently is for my kids. And, good on them. I'm glad it is. But for me, I can't ever get past that questioning. I can never get past it. But,
Yeah.
but I do often feel that when people are questioning and reading, they'll tangle themselves in knots trying to avoid a much simpler solution. And I do
Yes.
love Occam's razor, man. In the end, I'm like, look,
Well, yeah.
really? Like Pele and the watch. That's one of my very favorites. Like, okay, if you're walking on the beach and you see a watch laying there, you're like, must have been an accident. That watch just appeared. It's like nobody would conclude that. You would conclude, well, obviously somebody made that watch and put that watch there. It's so complicated that it couldn't possibly arise accidentally. And so it was clearly designed. And that's such a clean visual for what I think a lot of people kind of inherently try to talk themselves out of believing. But I mean, in the end, you're like, really?
So yeah, but like, and that'll work for some people, and if it works for you, great. But there's a
Yeah,
lot of people
agreed.
that are going to look at that example and they're going to say, "What, bro? Like that? I
That's
don't
true.
like that. Doesn't resonate with me." So if I can build a case that the universe complexifying is this beautiful process, and that's the game. So we can call it, intelligent design. We can call it a ham sandwich. Like it's the universe wants to complexify, right? So it goes back to that first Carl Sagan quote, like we are a way for the cosmos to know itself. So if we can put that, and then we're like, okay, however you think of that, like if you think of, you know, Brahman, Vishnu, if you think of Allah, if Yahweh, like, or you think of, the beautiful just cosmos, like I think, or the Tao, all those things, we're talking about the same thing, which is like
Hmm.
this beautiful thing that we are all connected to. So how do we foreground that? Like that's the key, right? And and then
Hmm.
we can talk about, stoicism's got a big resurgence today. Like stoicism is, there are virtues in there, like, courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom, I think is, yeah, I think those are all. And those um are big. If you're not of a religious bent, you can like kind of use those to compass and guide yourself.
Agreed. I think yes, I agree with that. And I see most of that as attempts, and this is me doing it too. So I don't want this to sound, in any way condescending. But that's most of it is attempts to like, my glass is empty. I know that my glass needs to be full of something. I know that I need to put something in there to add this
Right.
purpose and structure in my life. And I think a lot of times we're just pushing back against solutions that maybe are a little intuitive, like, I think it's just that, but I don't want it to be that. And so I've got to find things that will make it not that. And I think that's more how I grew up, was like, I want to
Right.
hard push back against this thing you're handing me because that's definitely not the right answer because that's bull crap and I don't like it. And so I'm going to find something else to put in here. And I found that with my kids, it was actually relatively simple to just throw out some of the old staples of like, well, let's take these just good, beautiful, and presumably
Yeah, the
true things,
transcendentals. Yeah.
and they just grow. And they're just like, well,
Yep.
that was so easy. There was no angst. There was no need for me to dig and find
Yep.
ways to find purpose, but to carefully justify it all according to, the rational principles that I've clung to my whole life. And you're like, why did I make it so hard? Why
Well,
did I just like, I should have just
yeah.
done this.
Well, and
And
that
you can't,
just
you can't, right? You can't, it's not that easy, of course.
I mean, that is the moment that we're in now. So you've got like institutional decay. So people they're in a crisis of meaning. And again, that's why, like, hey, if you can adopt a faith tradition, like it's like it comes like pre-packaged, like all of the ways to be. I think a lot of people have scar
Mhm.
tissue from, because we have the faith traditions and then we have like the humans in the faith system, the
Of
religious
course.
system, and they can kind of,
Implementation of, yeah.
and they can screw that up. And basically any human organization is going to have like humans that are going to screw it up. They're going to be narcissistic. They're going to be taking advantage of. They're going to be abusing humans like in their power. Any human institution is going to have those like pathologies. So it's hard to get past those sometimes. And a lot of people have scar tissue about religion from those same situations. But like the intent is to, as you say, like provide this template in a simple fashion so you don't have to like waste decades banging your head in the surf, like trying to find it. And one thing I see is like the concept of like you're just kind of surrendering to the unfolding of stuff and you're humble about your posture. And I see that as a commonality in a lot of these faith traditions. And it's just like we are getting, not to be like fatalistic, but like we're being like led, like it's like we're chained to like this wagon. I think this is an old Stoic. This might be like Epictetus or somebody, but like we're chained to this wagon and the wagon is going down the road. So we can either like lay in the mud and just get our face dragged, or we can stand up and like jog next to the wagon. And like that's the we don't need to go into like free will and all that, but like
But fate drags the unwilling and leads the willing. Is that the old, I
well,
think, quote that says
yes.
that?
So you have like the amor fati, like love of fate, and you just have to like kind of look at where you are, and like it's not to say give up on having agency in your life. It's to like just love the process and the unfolding of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think the Stoics would say that you have to separate things into what you can control and what you can't control. And the things that
Yeah.
you can't control, those givens in the universe, stop fretting over them, man. Stop worrying about it. Stop getting so wrapped around an
Yeah.
axle about it. Focus on the things you can actually do and change. And yeah, that's obviously something important we're looking to impart on our kids. But that's a huge cornerstone of the things I want to impart on my kids. But then again, that comes pre-baked into a lot of these faith systems. Like we could chose Stoicism, I suspect. But you said a word, and I wanted to talk on that word for just a second because I think it's a huge and important thing. We talk about risks a lot. One of the huge risks in parenting is allowing narcissism to creep in. And that word gets, I think, tossed around a lot. Everybody loves to diagnose everybody with everything nowadays on the internet, and that's just the way it is. But I'm talking about the quality of narcissism, not a diagnosis psychologically of somebody being a narcissist. The quality of narcissism, I think, drifts into humans automatically, right? It's baked in there. And particularly through childhood. Now, I think with a little guy, when you're talking like your little babies, like, hey, man, you just got to let them be that. That's what they are. That's actually their time to be narcissistic. They truly do need everything, and they are the focus of everything. But weaning your kids off of it as you kind of move them up toward adulthood, to me, is one of the absolute critical tasks of being a parent. And one of the hugest risks associated with parenting kids is this risk that they're just never going to stop being the center of the universe. And they're going to never realize that actually get out of your head and stop thinking about yourself and go do something else. And you're going to be, one, happier, but two, just a better human. I don't know. That's one of the biggest risks that I struggle with. Just trying to mitigate.
No, and you're absolutely right. And so like Freud had like, ego, superego, and the id. And so yeah, when kids are growing up, they have to like individuate and they have to like break themselves away and become their own person. And obviously like the conditions of our society with social media, and supporting or glorifying celebrity is not like a new thing, right? Like the Stoics dealt with it back in the, in like Rome, it was definitely a thing. Like people wanted glory, people wanted to be famous, they wanted money. None of that's new, right? But it's definitely prevalent like in our society today that people are like, they look at TikTok, they look at Instagram and they're like, I want that. I want to go viral. I want to have money. And that's hard to, put kids in perspective, and then with their self-esteem, right? Like we don't want them to be wallflowers, but we don't want them to trip over to narcissism. So it's hard to find that like healthy self-esteem that's in the middle where you're not like praising them for things that they don't really deserve, but you're not like being excessively critical. And and like I think about my dad, and like my dad never like complimented me. My dad was never, very, very rarely. So, when you got him, like it was very like, hey, like, wow, that was high praise. And then also I think about like, did that make me more driven? Cause he like wasn't like giving me like effusive praise, and like, what's the line? Because is that like, that becomes unhealthy where it's like, my parents are not meeting my emotional needs, but then it's like toxic on the other side too. So like it's very hard to find that happy medium.
It's so hard, and I don't pretend to have found it, and I don't want to claim to have the answers on that at all. But to the whole discussion today, I think that filling the glass, providing options for the children to fill the glass, providing ways for them to achieve some kind of system, or I guess to select some kind of system that provides meaning, moral foundation in their lives, protects from that. It is armor that can shield you from a lot of those tendencies to be like this solipsistic, phone driven human who is just like, it is me and all responses to me. It can protect from that. And so I think if I had to like put a bow on our topic today, really, we need to mitigate the risk that our kids are going to grow up either these purposeless, empty glasses, these total narcissists, or getting filled up, like becoming full glasses with things that are just horrifying to you personally or to society. The way we do that is we try to provide options for the kids to fill those glasses at home, to find the purpose, to find the ethical foundation with things that are, good for society and good for humans, and also tolerable to you as somebody that wishes to interact with your children in the future. And I think if we can do that, we can accomplish what we really set out to do, which is like, how do we mitigate these risks and achieve some kind of spiritual, success for our kids? Does that kind of sum it up pretty well?
I can't, I definitely, I can't do better than that. So I think like being humble and serving, having that service mindset, you're definitely going to set them up for success.
That's the hope. That is the hope. And we're saying this as two guys with a podcast. So like, oh man, it's just hard not to be self-deprecating. And also,
I know.
like, here we are,
I
I'm
know.
talking on video. Like, oh my gosh, I have so much trouble with this. It's hilarious. But it's just part of the ridiculousness of the world.
It is.
Dude, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, my friend. And look
Yes.
forward to continue our conversation next week.
You too. Absolutely.